It's a pretty bold move to attack the United States, but the Houthis, who control a critical part of the Middle East and the Red Sea, have now done it several times.
U.S. military has reported shooting down a cruise missile
that was launched toward the USS Laboon.
Today, a vessel actually being hit.
The missile fired by the Houthis struck the MV Gibraltar Eagle.
For months now, the Houthis have wreaked havoc on global shipping traffic by carrying out attacks on merchant ships in the Red Sea. That's a key transit route from the Indian Ocean through the Suez Canal to the Western world. But specifically targeting American ships and actually hitting one, that's new. And the United States has hit back multiple times now.
The United States has launched new strikes against the Iran-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen. This is the third round of U.S.-led strikes since Thursday night.
So why have the Houthis challenged the U.S. in this way? And how far are both sides willing to go? The Houthis are one half of a decade-long civil war in Yemen. They're armed, supported by Iran, and occupy a huge swath of Yemen, including the capital, Sana'a. Importantly, they also control everything west of Sana'a, which means they control key ports along the Red Sea. Their stated goal? Punish Israel for the war in Gaza.
The Houthis have declared completely their alliance with Hamas. Politically, there is no way the Houthis' position is going to be moved, even if Israel, there was a ceasefire, and even if Israel, the situation in the Gaza stabilized.
This is the Houthis' military spokesperson, Brigadier General Yahya Saree. He often talks about Gazans as his brothers and says his group, the Houthis, only targets ships owned by or associated with Israel. But there have been dozens of Houthi attacks on international ships to date, some with very tenuous or no clear link to Israel at all. And this creates a larger problem. About 12% of all global trade passes through the Suez Canal via the Red Sea, including 30% of the world's container shipments. That's about $1 trillion worth of goods each year. And the Houthi attacks have forced the world to make a very difficult choice. Sail through and take a risk, or take a much longer path around all of Africa. That adds thousands of kilometers and about 10 days worth of fuel and time to the trip. So the Americans hatched a plan.
We've launched Operation Prosperity Guardian under the umbrella of Combined Maritime Forces and under the leadership of Task Force 153.
The U.S., leading more than 20 other countries, have banded together to create a kind of protective shield around commercial traffic in the Red Sea. To date, the operation has helped more than 1,500 ships safely transit through. This was the public-facing effort to safeguard the free flow of international commerce. But we now know, from new details released today, what the U.S. military was doing covertly. When 2 Navy SEALs disappeared off the coast of Somalia, just south of Yemen last week, it was a real mystery what they'd been up to, some kind of super-secret nighttime mission. But now we know they were part of a commando operation, boarding a small boat filled with Iran-made ballistic and cruise missile parts that, according to the U.S., were bound for Yemen. Propulsion and guidance systems, warheads, the very same type used by the Houthis to attack ships in the Red Sea. Then, that same day, we learned of a major offensive by the United States to hobble the Houthis' ability to carry out further attacks.
The United States and the United Kingdom have launched airstrikes in Yemen at targets linked to Iran-backed Houthi militants.
The U.S. and the U.K. led strikes on 28 locations, hitting more than 60 Houthi targets in Yemen with cruise missiles and bombs. They say they hit weapons depots, launch sites, airfields, production facilities, and command centers. Within 24 hours, another attack.
The United States has carried out a fresh strike on a target associated with Houthi militants in Yemen.
U.S. Central Command confirms it launched Tomahawk land attack missiles from the USS Carney, targeting a Houthi radar site. And all of this produced two immediate things. One, a warning from President Joe Biden himself.
Bombing the Houthis, if the attacks don't stop, will you continue with the strike, sir?
We will make sure that we respond to the Houthis as they continue this outrageous behavior, along with our allies.
But there was also an immediate counter warning from the Houthis, a message that the U.S. strikes would not go unanswered or unpunished. When the U.S. attacked Houthi targets in Yemen late last week, they knew that there would be retaliation. They advised all American-flagged vessels to avoid the area around Yemen and the Red Sea for 72 hours. But about 72 hours later, on Monday, the Houthis struck back.
It's been confirmed that the US-owned cargo ship MV Gibraltar Eagle has been hit in the Gulf of Aden by a ballistic missile fired by the Houthis in Yemen.
According to U.S. Central Command, it happened at around 4 p.m. local time, that's 8 a.m. Eastern. No reported injuries, though, and according to the company that owns the ship, it only suffered limited damage to a cargo hold, still able to sail on. That attack was the first time we've seen the Houthis hit an American ship off Yemen's coastal waters since this conflict began. But they've tried several times before. Less than 24 hours earlier, on Sunday, an anti-ship cruise missile soared through the air towards an American destroyer, the USS Laboon. Several days before that, according to the White House, Houthis launched their largest attack to date, directly targeting American ships. U.S. destroyers have been very active in the region since late last year, primarily defending other international ships from incoming missiles and drone attacks. But more recently, they've been defending themselves. And the Houthis seem very aware that their attacks are likely to provoke a response. The American and British attack is inevitably coming, and any new attack will not remain without response and punishment.
People are seriously worried about an escalation and a proliferation, a horizontal proliferation of this war into a regional struggle. I don't think the Houthis will back down in a political sense.
We are now seeing many new fronts emerge, whether it is Hezbollah in the south of Lebanon, having skirmishes with Israel, Shia militia groups in Syria and Iraq targeting U.S. military installations. And of course, we've now also seen that the Houthis have raised the stakes by targeting the shipping lanes in the Red Sea.
Since Israel's war in Gaza began, one of the biggest questions out there has been, how does the world avoid this turning into a wider war? Well, right now, we're in it. This is the wider war. The Americans leading a coalition of countries to fight off Houthi attacks, while the Houthis, backed by Iran, allies of Hezbollah and Hamas, while they target dozens of ships, interrupting the flow of goods for thousands more, ultimately undermining a global network of trade traffic that affects billions of people.
Well, I think it's deeply troubling. There's been actual physical attacks on civilian and, of course, military shipping. And so immediately, that is a widening of the conflict.
But I'll leave you with this thought. So far, to my knowledge, the only casualties of this wider war in the Red Sea have been Houthis.
Nothing has crossed a U.S. red line where suddenly the conflict goes up a level to a very dangerous level.
If that were to change, if the U.S. or a major ally were to see its soldiers killed, they might be forced to act differently. That hasn't happened yet. But the way both sides are talking, it could.